Rain stitched the afternoon together in thin, relentless lines, soaking the lawn and darkening the bark of the old oak where she sat. The spoon trembled in her hand as she lifted it toward her mouth, rice clinging together with beans that had long gone cold, and something inside the scene felt so painfully wrong that it demanded to be noticed. What would you do if hunger pressed you forward even while shame tried to pull you back? Would you eat anyway, even when the world seemed to be watching, or would you let pride starve you? In that moment, the man who owned the house slowed his steps without understanding why. A millionaire whose shoes had never known mud, whose days rarely included rain unless it fell outside tinted windows. His name was Thomas Reed, and the sight of his maid eating alone in the rain would split his life into before and after. Thomas had built his fortune in Chicago real estate, the kind of wealth that moved quietly but decisively, buying blocks and shaping skylines while he attended charity galas and board meetings. He prided himself on efficiency, on keeping things orderly, on never letting emotions cloud decisions. The estate outside Lake Forest was a place of controlled beauty, trimmed hedges, and clean stone paths, a sanctuary from noise and need. Abigail Turner had worked there for almost a year, arriving early, leaving late, her presence a soft rhythm that kept the house breathing. She cleaned, cooked, organized, and disappeared when guests arrived. Thomas knew her name only because payroll required it, and even then it was filed away with other details that felt unimportant. Yet here she was, soaked and shaking beneath a tree, eating like someone who had nowhere else to go. He stood still, rain speckling his suit, the black sedan idling behind him. Something tugged at his chest, an unfamiliar tightness that made him uneasy. Abigail's face was pale, her hair plastered to her cheeks, and tears mixed with rain as she swallowed each bite. There was no shelter nearby, no umbrella, no sign that she had chosen this place for comfort. It felt like a confession written without words. Thomas wondered with a sudden sharpness how many times he had eaten warm meals without thinking, how often he had wasted food, how rarely he had asked himself who paid the unseen price for his comfort. If you were standing where he stood, would you turn away and pretend not to see, or would you step closer and risk learning something that might hurt? Abigail had once believed in gentle things. She grew up in a small town in Ohio, in a house where Sunday mornings meant church clothes and coffee on the stove, where her father read scripture aloud even when his voice shook from exhaustion. When he died suddenly of a heart condition, the ground beneath her life cracked open. Medical bills swallowed their savings. Her mother grew ill from grief and worry, and Abigail left college to work 2 jobs. Faith carried her through until it didn't, until prayers felt like they echoed back unchanged. She came to Illinois chasing stability, answering an ad for a live-out Maid job that promised fair pay. What it didn't promise was mercy when life fell apart again. Her mother's illness worsened, treatments draining what little Abigail had managed to save. Rent rose, the car she relied on broke down. She skipped meals, telling herself it was temporary, that God saw her struggle even if no one else did. On that day, she had eaten outside because she no longer had gas money to drive home during her break. She sat under the oak because the rain felt honest, because crying there didn't require explanation. Each bite tasted like survival and humiliation at once. She did not know Thomas was watching, wrestling with a conscience he had neglected for years. Thomas's childhood had been marked by scarcity, though he rarely admitted it. His father was a stern man who believed weakness invited disaster. They prayed before meals, but gratitude was measured in discipline rather than compassion. When money finally came into Thomas's life, it arrived like armor, protecting him from the vulnerability he despised. He gave to churches and charities, wrote checks that eased guilt without demanding change. Seeing Abigail like that, raw and exposed, scraped against something buried deep inside him. It reminded him of his mother counting coins at the kitchen table, of nights when rain leaked through the roof and hope felt thin. He turned away that day, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to face what he felt. Yet the image followed him, through meetings and meals, through sleep. He began to notice things he had ignored before. The way Abigail's hands shook when she worked overtime. The lunches she packed smaller and smaller. The exhaustion etched into her posture. Awareness crept in slowly, like dawn after a long night. Struggle, he realized, often hides in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to acknowledge it. Change did not come as a grand gesture. It came quietly through small decisions that accumulated weight. Thomas reviewed payroll and adjusted wages, convincing himself it was overdue fairness rather than charity. He arranged flexible hours without explanation. Groceries appeared more often in the house, leftovers intentionally untouched. He funded a local clinic anonymously, then another. Each act felt insufficient, but together they shifted something inside him. Abigail noticed, too, though she did not know why things were easing. She felt shame soften into cautious relief, prayers turning into whispers of gratitude again. Months passed, and the oak shed its leaves, rain giving way to snow. Abigail's mother stabilized, treatments covered by assistance Thomas never claimed credit for. Abigail enrolled in evening classes, hope returning in careful steps. Thomas, meanwhile, found himself changed by proximity to suffering. Wealth no longer felt like an end, but a responsibility. He began volunteering, listening to stories that dismantled his assumptions. Faith returned to him, not as a rigid rule-book, but as a call to love actively, sacrificially. One winter morning, Thomas walked the grounds alone, the memory of rain still vivid. He understood then that the moment under the oak had been a crossroads. He could have passed by and remained untouched, or he could have allowed discomfort to transform him. He chose, imperfectly but sincerely, the latter. Redemption, he learned, often begins with seeing. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of a moment you wish you had handled differently or a kindness you hope to offer, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story truly touched your heart, gently consider liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing, so more hearts might be moved by stories of compassion, regret, and second chances.